There you are. Hey, girl. Are you on mute?
I'm not. Can you hear me?
There you are. Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was seeing
Excellent.
you talk, but I didn't hear you.
I was on mute.
Oh, were you?
That doesn't help.
Oh, no, that didn't help. Well, it's always good to see you and see you in person. Not
Yes, yes.
that your picture's not lovely.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. I was hoping it would turn out lovely.
Oh, gosh. So how's real estate going for you?
Woo, it's good.
Overwhelmed, right?
Yeah, it's good. It is a bit overwhelming right now. What I'm trying to do is get my I'm working with my first set of buyer clients now.
Are you?
Yeah, yes. And so
Good.
that's been amazing. So it's like I want to hit the gas, but then I'm like, wait, hold on, am I doing this right? Okay, press the gas. But with my buyer clients, the wife is the dental assistant at my dentist office. So
Perfect.
yes, so that's just how I met her. She asked me, she said, so are you off today? I said, oh, I'm a real estate agent now. I'm doing this full time. And so that's how we just got, talking or whatever, because I just got my braces taken off.
Oh, well, your teeth are beautiful.
Yeah.
They did a good job.
Thank
So
you.
now you're going to do a good job for her, right?
Exactly. I'm like, okay, I better. No pressure. Whew.
No
But
pressure. Wow.
yeah,
Well, that's an ordeal to wear braces as an adult, isn't it?
it really is. Yeah, I had a crazy situation that they were
Yeah.
on for 4 years. Yeah, 3.5. Yeah, it was a long time. My bite.
You hardly know yourself without them
I know.
nowadays.
I'm like, what outfit should I put on with my teeth today? That's what I know. 'Cause
Oh, I love that.
I can't believe they're not on here anymore. I cannot. I'm like, wow.
Too funny.
Yeah. But yeah. So with the buyer clients, I did the buyer consultation. That went well.
Did it?
And I'm working with Juliana at Carolina Gold Mortgage, whatever,
Oh,
our
yeah.
in-house
Oh,
broker.
good.
Yeah,
Oh,
she's
good. Yeah.
phenomenal. She's
Hey,
fabulous.
really? Oh, good.
Yeah. And
Good.
so they haven't gotten a pre-approval yet. The husband, he works for Apple. So
Wow.
they moved from New York 3 months ago.
Oh,
So yeah,
no.
so they've only been in North Carolina in the Ballantyne area. They're renting
Oh,
for
wow.
3 months. Yeah. So the sweetest people.
Well, you lucked up, didn't you?
Yeah,
Mhm.
they really are. So yeah, they're just working through some things. The husband is on like some type of contract right now.
Yeah, yeah,
And they're trying to work through getting him pre-approved and
yeah. Well, they probably, because he's just moved, they don't have his full-time employment yet.
right.
Do they? Yeah,
And
yeah.
and so Apple, they're promising him that he's going to work from home. They have remote positions, but now
Oh, do they?
it's now just getting, to the point where, he's out of this contract and what's going to happen after that and all of that.
Yeah. Well, I
So
wouldn't have thought he'd have to move all the way down here from New York on a contract basis. Surely they anticipate hiring him, but just getting
yes,
it through all the red tape,
there you go.
and I'm sure it's ordered, but that's not anything unusual to a mortgage person. They, they see that often.
I bet. Yeah. And
Yeah.
they've been
So
communicating with me, Juliana, but yeah, the buyers are like, okay, we're still waiting. And so now they're like, okay, we want to go see a house on Saturday, but I don't have the pre-approval. And I'm like, wait, hold on. They're like really anxious because
well, of course they are. Of
yeah.
course they are. And it's not that you can't show them if you've got some time that you want to just spend time with them.
Yeah.
It's not the best use of your time, but obviously sometimes a relationship building activity is good. And it's not, again, we recommend you having that letter mainly so that they're looking at the price point that they can afford or they want to afford. Sometimes
Right.
they can afford more, but sometimes they don't want to go as high as they could, or vice versa. and we always seem to find that house is just a little bit more than what we can afford. We always like that, just a little bit more.
I know.
Yeah. So, and right now, that's not going to happen for many people to get to be able to, buy low. It's
Right.
probably not going to, but this is a good time, I think, to be working with buyers. These last few months, last year or so, has been so fast paced, and it's been so hard and so hectic. There have been so many demands on buyers and buyers agents. I think it's good, Danielle, that you're actually working with them now, and you can have just a little bit calmer relationship, and work through the process with them. Are they first time home buyers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that gives you a little more time, just to educate them a little bit. And even though you feel like you're new, you know more than they do,
Yeah.
so you just take a few steps at a time and guide them, as much as as much information as you have, and take them that way. So, and thank goodness you work with someone who's congenial and wants to. They're really excited about buying their house, I'm sure.
They are, yeah, and we've really hit it off already, just personality wise, and they're already like, "You're so professional and friendly, and we're glad we met you."
Well,
So, yeah,
congratulations.
yeah,
That's
I feel
nice.
like they're clients who could turn into friends. That's I
Oh,
feel like they do.
through the years, there's been maybe a
Mhm.
dozen or so that I really did feel like we just became friends. They become your what we call the Raven fans. They tell everybody about you.
Yep.
And like I say, it's nice to know that you have that depth of a relationship. You're
Mhm.
not just taking an order, you're
Right.
actually working with them. You're taking a team approach. You're taking the leadership, but you're taking a team approach. And so I think that's fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Well,
Yeah.
good. I'm so glad that you're already working with somebody. You
I
go, girl.
know. I know. Yeah.
Now, did you finish Ignite already?
I actually start tomorrow because
Oh,
the
you
launch is
just hit.
tomorrow. Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh my gracious, you are getting underneath a lot of information, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I'm like, okay, just bring it on. Yeah.
Bring it on. Let's learn. Well, I didn't know as we were talking. Of course, today's the day we go through listings, the listing, some of the listing paperwork. But if you have any questions about your buyer, you jump in and ask me.
Okay.
But so I'm just going to we're going to go right through the basic paperwork. It's kind of what we do in these sessions. That's the basics because we don't have time to go into a lot of detail.
Mhm.
Have you gotten into a T group yet?
Oh, yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. So Robert Gill,
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Oh, love Rob. I told him he just broke my heart.
mine too. Mine
You know,
too.
but you'll like Sharon. Sharon
Oh,
Martin is going to continue your evening session, so
oh,
you can still do it on the evening time. We didn't think that would be quite as needed, but it's been real helpful to a lot of agents. And
yes.
sometimes it's to the agents who are still working part-time or full-time. But sometimes with all the classes you have to go to that we offer, it's still nice to have an evening
It really
for
is.
your T group. Cool,
Yes,
cool.
yes.
Well, we will definitely meet Rob, and he promised he may come back one of these days, but he just can't do it right now. And I said, well, I know everybody's going to be disappointed, and because he's been doing this for several years, and just always so available. But like I say, I think you'll like Sharon. I don't think I know you. She's a lovely person too, and very caring,
Oh, good.
so and knowledgeable. So that'll be good for you. Well, let me see if I can get some forms up. Hold on just a minute. I'll try not to lose you. That's my favorite line lately. I'll try not to lose you.
Okay, that's
Lord, I
fine.
tell you what, it absolutely amazes me how easy I can lose somebody, but hang in there. Let's see. That's not what I want. I guess I'll have to open it. Let's go. I bet you're strong on computers, aren't you?
Not until my 14-year-old comes in here and she does something and I'm like, huh?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Then she makes me feel like, never mind. I thought I knew something. No.
Well, they grew up with it. It becomes so natural to them. And it's
Uh,
just not fair. It's
Not
not
fair at
fair, right?
all. Not fair
Okay,
at
let's see
all.
if it. Do you see the form?
I do.
Look
Yay.
at that. Whoa. Okay, let me get back up to the beginning of it. And we'll like I said, we're going to kind of meander through a listing so that you'll actually have a little bit of oversight, particularly when you're going through Ignite. It'll help you to have the overview of the listing. We have several different checklists. Imagine that. I told somebody the other day, I'm going to have a checklist of checklists because we have so many different ones, but we all have a different pattern of doing things. Some
Right.
people are more comfortable with doing one online. Other people want a physical sheet of, paper of checklists. So
Right.
this one is the one that has been recommended through Command. And so when you actually put your seller or your prospective seller into opportunity, set up an opportunity for it, this will kind of give you an overview or a checklist of taking it through Command. And I'm sure you're going to some of those classes as well. I'm not going to go through each detail on the checklist, but what I will do is I will email this to you after the class so that you'll have it, that you can kind of study. Would that be helpful to you?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to increase the size of this a little bit too. Can you see that better?
Oh, yes, that's perfect.
That better? Yeah. Okay. But like you say, remember in Command, there's all those different stages, and I got to tell you, I'm still learning that myself. I learn a little bit, a piece of the Command, and then I add to it as I go. It's because it's such an overwhelming, humongous program. But anyway, this is the checklist that you would probably want to use as a guide when you're going through all the things in your opportunity. Now, it's quite detailed. Then we have this. This is just something that I put together a few years ago to hopefully simplify. It's not so much a checklist as much as to kind of guide you in the process of doing a pre-listing meeting and then going to meet with a prospective client. I'm going to talk to you today about the different forms you use. We have something we like to call it a pre-listing. It's not a consultation. You were talking about a while ago, your buyer consultation. You don't necessarily want to have a consultation with the seller because all they want to know is how much you can sell a house for. How much is my house worth? I mean, that's you can just tell them what you think, and that's all they want. Say sign here. But we really want to have something called a pre-listing packages, and in that pack or package, you're going to have a number of forms that you want to get into their hands before you actually sit down and talk to them. So your pre-listing pack can be done in a meeting, or it can be just sent out through your e-signature program like DocuSign or Dotloop or Zip Forms. All three of those, you can set up a template. But by and large, again, these are things you're going to study. These are not some things that I need to go line by line for you. But as you are working through the different checklists or different process, these are tools for you to absorb, hopefully. Okay. So I want you to be aware that you do have this little list. Again, it's not a checklist. It's just what's going to happen next in your process. And we're going to be talking about the forms. It's quite lengthy. It's four pages long, but let me tell you, listings are not easy. Listings are very labor intensive up front. Once you get everything in the system, then you're pretty well set until you get an offer. But it takes quite a bit of effort, quite a bit of work right up front to get that listing ready to go into the MLS. Now, this is the overall, and I love this. An agent did this for us, a year or so ago. Whoops, I keep got it. The home selling process. I kind of like to have a bird's eye view of what's going to happen. I
Mhm.
love drones. Do you like drone pictures? Where
Yeah.
you can show the whole neighborhood, where the pool is and where the school. I love that. Well,
It's
this
so
is a
cool.
drone view. Okay. So you can kind of get a picture of what's pieces of the puzzle are in process. Again, it's another way of looking at that first one I showed you about for command. Command has it more linear and has it in the computer. This is just a picture of looking at overview. Obviously, this is telling you what the seller is going to do on the left side. That's the seller side. This is going to be your agent. These are the things that you're going to be doing at the same time. The seller's doing all this. This is what you're going to be doing.
Wow.
And in the middle of it, these are the things that you do between one another. Okay. So you'll have your initial real estate consultation if you want to do it in a one step. Gary, when I first came to KW, I had never heard this. I'd been in business 20 years at that time, and I had never heard of having a two-step listing. And I think there is so much documentation and so much information you need. It is so vital that you have at least 2 times with them, either 2 times sitting down with them or at least delivering this information to them so that you can, when you do sit down with them, you can draw from that information. But what I find out is a lot of sellers won't read it. You would like to think that when you send it, it's important and they will read it. A lot will, but a lot won't. But you take the advantage of the ones who will so that you can use it in your sit down and your actual one-on-one with them. So if you can think of it as a 2-step listing presentation, it divides out some of the information. Because Mercy, if you either go to them and sit down first and then go back and collect stuff, or you give it to them up front and tell them you want them to fill it out so that you can get it when you go to them. So it's really, I like the process of getting information to them first. But again, you may find it works better for you to go back and get it. Right now, getting the pricing is really critical. It's not as critical as it has been in the past because sellers have just about been able to name their own price in the last couple of years, but that's changing. We're seeing a shift. We're getting a little bit more close to a balance between the buyer and the seller markets. So the pricing is going to become more important now than it has been in the past 2 years. So you want to, anytime you have a class on CMAs, the market analysis, make sure you take it, because the more you can practice, it's called an art. It's not a science. A lot of it is opinion, and yes, you do have to base it on data that's of the recent closed properties, but you have to be able to interpret that data. Okay, so it's real important that you continue to study and practice the art form of negotiation and CMAs. Okay, here's where after you do all this, then you're going to place the home on the market. You're going to have your showings, and out of your showings, obviously, you're going to get an offer to purchase. All right, you're going to be marketing using any of these, not necessarily all. Any of these you're going to be able to use to market the home. And hopefully when we get down here, you're going to go through the due diligence period. You're going to go through the settlement, and there's where you're going to close and get paid. Okay, so that again, it gives you the overview as to when and where the pieces fit in the puzzle. We're going to talk about in a moment about the residential property disclosure. There are 4 exemptions on the residential property disclosure, and this is a copy of the statute that says who can be exempt. And I just thought you might want to see that in print. Basically, it's a foreclosure, an estate, new construction, and with a family member that have lived in the house. You don't obviously have to have one in between family members in the house. That happens sometimes between parents and kids and parents, or maybe a divorce. There are different scenarios. So those are the primary ones that you keep in your mind. But again, that's going to show you on in print what the statute is. Now, again, here's your basic disclosure. You have to have this anytime you talk with a person about any of their motivation, their drive, any of their personal information. And sometimes, like if you're in an open house and you're doing an open house and someone comes in and they just start spilling out why they're moved here and how much money they can spend and all that, you got to say, oh, wait, I got to tell you something. Just put your little hand up and say, wait, I got to tell you something. And you know what? That's when you take leadership in the relationship. It's when they're not driving to tell you, you stop and you take that lead and say, by law, I have to share this with you. And this is not a contract. This is just a disclosure of how we do business as agents in North Carolina. And by law, I have to tell you that. And so, and then we can go on to talk about how we'll can work together. So don't be afraid to stop someone in the middle of a conversation. It's not rude if you do it in a fun way. That's why I said, you're like what is this, the crossing guard at the schoolyard. They put the little sign up and everybody stops. So that kind of gives you a picture of how they'll be startled at first, but you take the leadership from that point. Now, I'm reminded often to remind you all, this is your disclosure. This is not anything for the buyer to respond to or the seller to respond to. They just need to know what you are going to share as an agent and how you and our firm do business. Now, we do business, again, I mentioned it a minute ago, but let's highlight it right here. This form is not a contract, okay? Signing disclosure only means you've received it. That is all that is required by law. That it's a disclosure that's signed that you gave it to them and disclosed it. Now, you can read all these things, you don't have to. The main thing is you'll spend about 2 or 3 minutes. You don't want to spend a long time on this. By and large, you just want to let them know agents in North Carolina can work in these categories, and our firm does all of these categories. Okay, our firm will support as what's called a single agency, which we would just represent the seller, and most likely somebody's going to come in to bring us an offer from another firm, because that's what multiple listing is all about. We want to cooperate. So it's very likely that we will only represent the seller, and someone from another firm would come in with a buyer. Then the next opportunity is something called dual agency. Dual agency is when we, as a firm, might represent the buyer and the seller. I mentioned an open house a while ago. Sometimes you might be doing an open house for your own listing, and a buyer comes in and you need to disclose that to that buyer that if they want to write an offer and if you represent them, that would put the firm in a dual agency role. You as an individual would be what's called an individual dual agent. All right. And we do support that in our firm. You may represent both parties. It's not very often that you do. Most agents make a decision early on in their career that is too risky, too scary to represent both sides. It's like, let me just take care of my side and let somebody else take care of their side. So what happens if in that open house scenario, you are holding the house open as you're listing, a buyer comes in, the buyer is interested in purchasing the house. Then what you want to do is tell them they can have a buyer's agent that would be within our firm. We would designate someone to represent them. You would continue to represent the seller. We would get another one of our agents to represent the buyer, and you would get a 25% referral fee because you are the one that attracted the buyer. all right? But because either the seller doesn't want you to, or you've made the business decision not to be an individual dual agent, then we need to get someone to represent the buyer, all right? So those are the three types of agency relationships that we work in. So you want to just check each one of those, because we do all of those. Now you want to make sure that you talk to an to the seller. See, if the seller decides not to list their house, he needs to understand that a buyer agent is representing the buyer, and anything that seller tells that buyer's agent might as well be told to the buyer, because the agent has to share it. And sometimes sellers who are selling their own homes, which we haven't seen many of them recently, not too many for sale by owners, but they do need to be aware that they would have to, they would need to be discreet in what they share with the buyer agents, okay? Now, again, here's where you would get a signature from one or both sellers. You put your name, your license number, and the firm name. Okay. Now, if there are more than 2 sellers, there is an addendum, and I don't think I have it in this stack of forms, but it's called additional signatures addendum. Every now and then, particularly in an estate, you know, when you're selling an estate, there could be 8 or 10 people, because, well, there's 2 becauses. First of all, they might have had a lot of kids, but each one that's an heir could be married. And if they are married in North Carolina, they have what's called a marital right, or rights of survivorship, to anything one spouse can inherit. It comes to both parties. So there are times, most of the time it would be within an estate, that you would have to have 7 or 8 signatures. So you would use that additional signatures addendum. Okay. Now, the next form that you really want to be aware of is this exclusive right to sell. Now, let me show you something. I'm going to stop right now and go back to another file of the forms that you hope the seller has already looked at, because you got them to them. Okay. Now that we're in the listing folder right now, and I want to scooch back to the pre-listing folder. All right, in the pre-listing folder, we have a number of forms, and you might want to set this up as a template, you know, so that you have it easily and readily available to send. One of the first things you want to make sure that they know that they're going to have to fill out is your residential property disclosure. The residential property disclosure is required by the state. Looky here. This is the state seal. That means it is required by the lawmakers. It's a statute. It's a lawmaker requirement that all sellers are required to provide a residential property and owners association disclosure to any buyer. So if you're trying to get a for sale by owner, maybe you want to try to list a house that's going to be a for sale by owner, even those owners are required by state law to provide a disclosure. So these, there's 2 forms. One's this disclosure and one's the mineral, oil, and gas. We can provide those 2 forms to a seller, even though they're not our client. All the other forms cannot be shared. We can't share, you know, the offer to purchase. We can't share any of the agreements or the addendums, because those are strictly for realtor use. But these disclosures that show this seal on it can be shared. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind is you can't put pen to papers, what I normally say. Only the seller can fill this out. So you can't go through your DocuSign and fill it out and let them sign it. No. It has to be filled out and signed by the seller. This is the disclosure. It's their disclosure. Okay. The only time you get involved in this disclosure is if you know something that they have chosen not to tell.
Mm.
Every now and then you'll have a seller. In fact, I think it was just last night or yesterday, one of my agents called about a scenario that they knew that the seller knew, and the seller said, I don't want you telling.
Mm.
And that puts you in the middle. I mean, that's a pretty tough situation. But look right here. If you are assisted in the sale of your property by a licensed real estate broker, you will be responsible for completing and delivering the disclosure statement, and the broker must disclose any material facts about your property which he or she knows or reasonably should know. Wait a minute, I need to increase that, don't I? Okay, is that better?
Yes, that's good. Yeah.
Now we can see. Okay. That's scary right there.
Yeah.
It says, if you know or reasonably should know, regardless of your, Mr. Seller, your responses on the disclosure statement. You know, that puts a lot of responsibility on us, but it through the years, it has not been quite as scary as it sounds, but it is still, it's something to keep in mind.
Mhm.
So when a seller tells you or discloses that they have water moisture issues in their crawl space, they might as well put it on the disclosure form, because you're going to have to disclose it to an agent who's bringing in an offer. Now, obviously they can do a yes or a no, or they can do no representation. It's pretty clear that if they have a yes, that they're disclosing it. If they say no, they should be upfront that they don't know, and if they don't know, then they don't know. But right here, this causes some little chagrin every now and then. It says, if you check no representation, you're choosing not to disclose the condition or characteristics of the property, even if you have actual knowledge of them or should have known of them. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I
Really.
guess the lawmakers say we can't make you tell the truth, but if you don't tell the truth and you put no representation, then you're setting yourself up for misrepresentation lawsuit after it closes.
Right.
You see, if the seller chooses not to tell something that they do know, if after it closes or doesn't close, sometimes it doesn't close, the buyer then would have the right to sue them for misrepresentation. And furthermore, you've got that situation, but you got down here where if the agent knows, the agent has to tell, So what you're doing with this piece of paper right now is kind of setting some boundaries, setting expectations,
Right.
You can't do anything to hold them legally responsible to it, but you're talking about legal matters here. And anytime you hear the word misrepresentation, that's a legal term. That's something that has to be determined in a court of law. It's not going to be something you can determine. So you kind of talk to sellers about that and say, my approach is, it's better to disclose and not need to than not disclose when you should have. I often say it, if you're going to err on the side of disclosure. It's better to go ahead and note that there has been a repair, because sometimes people say, well, why should I put anything on there if I've had it repaired? I mean, it seems to me like it's taken care of. Maybe so, maybe no. You're anticipating that the repair person did what they needed to do. But I have to tell you, the very first, whatever claim and, trial that we went through had to do with a seller, and it was our seller, who had, I think it was $19,000 of work done in the crawl space of her house.
What?
And would you believe those people never finished the job? And it had been done like 2 years before. So when a buyer came in and found all this work, she said, no, that can't be. here's the receipt. I paid all that much money. And that company had not completed the work and had gone out of business. But she still was responsible with all that work underneath that house. And so through the years, I have remembered that, obviously. And it's really hard not to say you've had the work done, so it should be okay.
Right.
Sometimes it's not. I was in a class, I guess it was a Jenna or Bickup just recently, and the instructor was saying that if there is a work that the seller thinks that has been done, if there's a claim that goes in, the real estate commission looks at the length of time that from the time the work was done. So like I said, if the work was done 5 years ago or whatever, and there's no issues during that period of time, then that could be considered, well, the work, it was fixed. But she said if they have done the work in the last 3 months or 6 months, that hasn't stood the test of time. And she said you probably would, well, not probably, you would definitely be better off to say, we had a repair, we had a leak or whatever, and we had it fixed 3 months ago, and here's the receipt. So you're upfront in that you had it done, and therefore here's your proof of, and also that shares liability, because the name on that form,
Right.
hopefully they haven't gone out of business like that other guy I was telling you about in a few months, but you share that risk, and whoever's name's on that invoice, and hopefully it's not the sellers, if the name, then you could go back to them and verify that the work was completed. So there's this, I could spend 3 hours on this form itself, but I'm not going to, I promise you. One day we might do that. And I do have a couple of recordings that are the whole that I spent the whole 2 hours of this class on that. One of the things you need to be aware of in North Carolina, this residential property disclosure is serious from the standpoint of it needs to be in the hands of the buyer prior to the buyer making the offer. Now, what we've been seeing in the last few months and couple of years really is offers being made so fast that the sellers, agents or listing agents, haven't been getting them the residential property disclosure. Well, that sets up something's called a 3-day right of rescission. You don't hear that very much in North Carolina, 3-day right of rescission. This basically says if they don't have that disclosure when they make the offer, or at the time they make the offer, then within 3 days, they can cancel the contract no matter what is on that disclosure, whether they agree with it or don't agree with it. So it's very important for listing agents to make sure that they get that residential property disclosure and have it ready immediately and attach it. I don't know if you've looked on listings very much yet, but I guess working with your buyers, you have been looking at listings. Make sure you look for the attachments on the listings, because one of the best things that's happened in MLS is when they allowed us to attach these disclosures on the actual listing. So when if you're going to write an offer, right there is your form that you need, and that closes up one of those loopholes that a buyer may be able to walk away from a transaction. And that is one of the very few things that he could get the due diligence back if they would walk. So you want to be real careful with your buyers. Make sure that you get that residential property disclosure. If it's not on, if it's not in MLS, you call that listing agent and say, I need that disclosure form. I'm getting ready to write an offer. Okay. So be very cautious of that and conscious of that 3-day right of rescission. And that explains it right here in this middle section here. So your seller then is going to, well, you're going to put the seller's name and property address, and then the seller will sign it here. Again, if you need additional signatures, you can do that with that additional signatures addendum. The buyer then, when they do bring an offer in, it's expedient that when the buyer's agent gives you that offer to purchase, they should have the disclosures already signed. the mineral oil and gas and the residential property disclosure. And it's not, the buyer doesn't have to agree. They just have to have the disclosure form. And would be where they sign it here. You want to make sure that you put the property address up here, because all this other information has got to apply to something, and we got to know who it applies to. And hopefully it'll be, you'll have the address right here. I'm not going to go through each one of these things because you really need to study this. Residential property disclosure is very thorough. Make sure that when you're looking at it, you don't miss some of these interior boxes. All the way through here, you see the interior boxes. All right. One of the ones I want to point out to you right here. This, have you heard the term masonite siding? I don't know if you've heard. There are a lot of houses that were built back in the 80s and 90s that the primary siding was something called masonite. It's a compressed wood, man-made. You know, they were trying to get away from the expense of the brick or an expense of stone. So the builders came up with a product called masonite siding. Well, masonite siding is a good siding. It just doesn't last a long time, you know, and you have to really maintain it well. You have to, you know, paint it about every 6 to 7 years, and you have to take care of it. Well, it started failing after about 20 years, and it didn't hold up as well. So then they came out with something called Hardy Plank, and they've come out with some other types of siding. But I just wanted to point out to you, if you find out from your seller that they have masonite siding, that's what this is right here, because there's no term on here for masonite. So make sure you want know to check that. All right. They ask questions when the roof was installed. Was the roof repaired at any time that your seller owned the property? Things about the furnace. What type is it? Is it going to be a heat pump, which is electric, or is it going to be a gas furnace, or is it going to propane gas even? So this basically is disclosing as much in detail about the functions of the house that a buyer needs to know. Every now and then you'll get a person who just like a stove. They don't want an electric stove, they want a gas, and they want to have availability of gas to have. So you're going to be looking for a house that offers natural gas, you know. So there will be a few things that you need to be conscious of, and again, make sure that the buyer has the information to make that decision. You'll see on here about the septic tank, or is it city provided, and you'll quickly be introduced to a form that we have in our office about an agent verification of whether or not it's septic or whether or not it's sewer. I'll show you that form in just a few minutes, but it's a form. Basically, not only does the seller disclose it right in here, you as an agent are going to follow up and make sure that what he said is accurate. Every now and then, they don't do it to mislead. They don't do it to be deceptive or misrepresent is the word. But sometimes that's what they think. We've had numerous situations where someone, they've told us that it was on city county sewer, and it's not. It's on a septic. Or they might tell us it's on city county water and it's on a well, or vice versa. So you have a responsibility as a listing agent to verify it, and then you as a buyer's agent also have a responsibility. And what the real estate commission calls it is, they say it's that agent has the responsibility to discover and disclose. So you keep those words in your mind. You have a responsibility in your agent relationship, whether it's listing or the buyer, to discover and to disclose. And when you disclose it, then the buyer has the right to make the decision. He has the information to make the decision. Okay. So you're not making his decision. you're just verifying. And particularly we've had so many issues in our state, really, on septic and sewers, that we have this little in-house form to try to cut down on people having a lot of money out of their pockets and settling claims. There are, like I said, there's what, 31 questions here. And so read through these periodically. Don't just breeze through them one time. Read through them periodically, because you're going to have to refer back to them. Another one of the things you want to look at right here, did the seller get the proper permits for that room that he was so proud to show you that he just finished? You know, it might be the basement, or it might be a sunroom. They just do all kinds of things. You know, a real big thing right now is this open floor plan. And there are a lot of sellers who are knocking down interior walls and making a lot of open space, and like a split level house that, you know, was built 30 years ago. And it's like, oh my gosh, and they're so excited because they just did that, or they might have even done it with a contractor. They may have never gotten permits. So you as an agent need to check with the permit department in the county where the house is located to see if permits were done. One of this class I was telling you about, one of the things that they brought up was the fact that there are a lot of people doing what they call flipping, you know, where people are buying a house in poor condition and going in and making it beautiful cosmetically, but they're not doing some of the other work that needs to be done, or some of the work they're doing, they're not doing it with permits, because they're thinking, well, we own the house, so why can't we do what we want to the house? Knowing full well they're getting ready to try to sell it in 2 months. Therein is where some of the problems are coming in with real estate complaints, real estate commission complaints about an agent that represents a flipper. You've got to make sure that the permits were done, or you at least have to disclose that the work was done and no permits are available. Okay. So again, that gives the buyer the choice or the chance to know if they want to take the risk of having buying a house where the work was not permitted. The permit basically is for the purpose of having a county inspector come out and inspect the work. So when you look for a permit, you want to see the word closed. Because if you don't see that it's closed, that means they may have purchased the permit, but they never had the inspection. And what's important to a buyer is that the county inspected it per code. Okay. They may not be inspecting the beauty of it. They're inspecting to make sure that it was done per code at that particular time. So you want to, the permits are important from that standpoint. If there's no permit, then you need to disclose that there's no permit. Another one down here you got to be aware of is maybe a private road. Maybe it's a house. We have out Mid Hill. I live in Matthews, Mid Hill area, and we have a number of little communities. There may be 4 or 5 houses and a gravel road. Could be asphalt, but most of the time it's a gravel road. And it'd been 4 or 5 family members. You know, they built on the family land, and they have this one road goes into these 4 or 5 houses. Well, if you're going to sell to an outsider, that outsider that's not in the family needs to have a shared maintenance agreement. So, because in the family, they have through the years have worked it out, or somebody's already fixed it. Well, when the outsider comes in, they may not fix it, and they may expect the outsider to fix it. So particularly if there's a lender involved, I would recommend it anyway, but a lender is going to require it. And if you're talking to a seller who might be on a road that's not maintained by the public, you know, the state or the county, then you would have to have a shared road maintenance agreement. And you know what, sometimes we do it at the time, you know, once you list it, even before you begin to close on it, you'll have to have that. So you want to share that with the seller. that'll be enough right now. I've probably missed something, but I'll get it next time. The next part of this is the owners association. Many properties that we sell right now are in developments that have owners associations. It seemed for years when I was first starting business, we didn't even have owners association. Then we only had them for condo townhome complexes. Now we have these big planned developments, you know, that have property managers for the whole development. So you want to make sure that your seller gives you the information about the homeowners association. The homeowners, and you know what? Sometimes there's more than one. Sometimes there's two owners associations. One would be they maybe for the entire area, a multi-use area. Then there might be a second one, which would be for the condo association. That would be not part of the master. It would be a part, it would just be called condo association. Burkdale up on the north side, let's see, Regent Park, Four Seasons, I think. There's Reflection Point right over here off of Monroe Road. There's another one, Baxter. Oh, you're familiar with Baxter, probably in Fort Mill. They have master policies. Then they have the second HOA that would be for the condo. So just be aware of some of those big neighborhoods that have multi-use in them, that you might have two. So you might want to get both of those. Now, this is the basically the page that tells what services they have for those dues that they pay. Dues can be paid monthly. Sometimes they're quarterly. They might be semi-annually, or they might be an annual fee. So again, you need to know that because it's got to go in MLS. Okay. Right here is a list of services that are most often offered through owners associations, and you need to have the seller check those as to which ones are offered by that particular association. Okay, so now that basically after you get your initials here, or the sellers and the owners and the buyer initials, that is what's called the residential property disclosure and owners association. Now, remember a while ago, I showed you the statute of the properties that are exempt from the residential property disclosure. But what do you do if you're selling a house or selling a property in an area that has an owners association, but the property is exempt for the residential property disclosure? Aha, they have done a form for you. Imagine that. All right. If it's exempt from residential property disclosure, but there is an owners association, you want to use this form. This is half of the first one. Okay. This is the one that just talks about the owners association. You'll see this more often in a foreclosure than anything, because of the bank is certainly not going to tell you anything about the property condition, but they do have to give you something about the owners association, and it may be they'll point you to the property manager to get it. But anyway, just know that there is this secondary form if you need it. I'm not going to go through it because it's just like the first part. Now, this form right here, this is called the mineral oil and gas rights. Look at that word. It says mandatory disclosure statement. I've been in the business just under 40 years, and I have never seen mandatory in the title of a form before. Well, I think the lawmakers were serious about this one. They were determined you're going to use this little form. Look here, there's a seal again. That's just by the lawmakers. Now, this has to do, it started when there was some what's called fracking. Have you heard the term fracking, where they go about a mile under the ground and put pipes through there to handle gas that, like I said, goes under the under property, and the owner probably would never know that it was even there. Well, the lawmaker said the property had, the owner the property owner has the right to all the dirt beneath them and all the air above them. So they say, the lawmaker said, nobody has the right to sell off rights of fracking or whatever right it is that the owner doesn't know. And if the owner knows, they have to tell. All right. So let's look at this. The pattern here, these three questions right here or comments, you'll see the pattern is the same for those three, and then the same pattern down here for the 4 through 6. You see the same pattern?
Yes.
No representation does not answer these two. So they can say they don't know if somebody else had sold off. They may not. Then when they bought it, this might not even been a form, might not even been used. However, they must answer these two. They must answer whether or not they've sold off a mineral right, or are they planning to do it before closing. We rarely ever see anything on here other than no representation and no and no. In our area, we have not had an issue with fracking. You know, we have not had some of these issues. Now, having said that, I have seen two where this one was yes, because we live in an area that the first gold mine was discovered right over here to the east of us, and in a community called Wilmore. It's uptown. A lot of restored homes. It's beginning to be, and it is a beautiful area. We found 2 houses there that they knew that the mineral or the gold rights had been sold off in those properties. But other than that, you rarely ever see it. What you would more likely see would be down here where it has to do with oil and gas rights. And again, in our area, we have not had an issue. But I just want you to know, you've got to do this form, and you have to answer all 6 of these. And remember, this is for the buyer. This is the seller side. And this is where the buyer initials that they got this form and they've read each one of these individual statements. Okay. Again, it looks very much like your residential property disclosure, doesn't it? Where you have your property address, the owner's name, owner's signature, and the buyer or purchasers. So those are the primary disclosures that you're going to see listed with your listings and the MLS as attachment. And if you don't have them on the MLS, you're going to call the listing agent and ask them, or you're going to be the listing agent that puts them out there. Now, the other form, or it's a brochure that I think is really helpful. This is one that's called Questions and Answers on Home Inspections. It used to be required. This year, for some reason, the lawmakers, the rule makers, decided it did not have to go into the hands of your buyers, your sellers. But it's so important. I would just highly recommend that you continue to use this brochure. We have it online. Obviously, I'm going to send it to you. Or you can buy these brochures uptown at the association office at Canopy. You can buy them for 25 cents. You can also order them online at the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. Again, 25 cents, no tax or shipping. Just to have a few of these brochures. I think it looks nice if you do decide that you want to hand deliver or even mail that pre-listed packet. It's nice to have the different brochures. It pulls people's attention to it because of the different colors and all. It's an attractive brochure. So you want to have some of those to go into your pre-listed package. Or again, if you're going to do it online, go ahead and include it. It answers a number of questions. Sellers need to know what buyers are going to be looking at, and they need to know what a home inspector is going to be looking at. Again, they're answering questions on the residential property disclosure, And they need to know that when a buyer hires an inspector to come in, what is the inspector going to be looking for on what they have put on the disclosure, right? So it basically it's informed, just information. Sellers don't have to do anything with home inspections other than learn how to read the report once you get it. But anyway, this is a good little brochure, and it's easy to read, obviously, from here. Now, the only other disclosure form, if the house was built before 1978, remember your pre-licensing class?
Oh, yeah.
If the
Yeah,
house was built, you remember that, don't you? If it was built before 1978, it is highly likely that it has lead-based paint. Now, if the house is older than 1978, your seller does have to provide this disclosure. It's not required after 1978, but before 78, it is required. They are not required to have any reports, but what is required is right here, this little section. If they know of any lead-based paint, or if they have any reports of lead-based paint, they're to provide those. If they don't, and they check that they don't, they have no knowledge, they initial here, and that's their disclosure. Then when the buyer sees this form, the buyer then is going to look at their answer. Then the buyer's going to initial here, and right here, it's important that they know the buyer needs to have this pamphlet. It's called Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. That form is, it's a little brochure that is provided by on a national scope from the national EPA. And I've got a copy in here for you that you can send it out online if you need to, but you want to have it for your buyer too, okay? But they check that they have got it or they haven't gotten it. Then right here, it says they can have an opportunity to do a lead-based paint inspection. Very few people do that. Lead-based paint right now has, let's say it's been so many years they've been covering up paint since 1978 that it's very unlikely or that they're going to have problems with lead-based paint, except when it's disturbed. And that's the word, disturbed. If for whatever reason they're going to remodel a house, you definitely want to make sure that they know they have the opportunity to have it tested before they buy the house, because they're going to remodel. There is also a separate little pamphlet from EPA about remodeling a home that has lead-based paint, and you are required to, not required, recommended to use a contractor that is certified to work with lead-based paint. So if you get in that situation, make sure you get the remodeler's a brochure, or exact, like I say, it's a little pamphlet. Now, look at page 2 of this. This is one of the very few forms that is a disclosure between the buyer and the seller that you as an agent have to sign.
Oh, wow.
Right here, where it says agent has informed the seller's obligation, that's where your initials go, because you're going to explain this form to them and you're going to show them that pamphlet so that they know that a buyer is going to have the right to do a lead-based paint inspection. And if they have knowledge of it, they need to provide it. Now, once you initial here, you're also going to come down here on the bottom. Look here, the selling agent who represents the buyer, or the listing agent, since we're talking about listing state, would be you have to sign here. This is, like I said, this is one of the very few forms that, as a disclosure, that buyer's agent and listing agent has to sign. So just don't overlook that. Now here's that little book, the little booklet that I was telling you about. It's several pages long, but it is in digital format. So if you want to, obviously you can send it out in your packet. And I'm going to breeze right on through it because we're not going to take time to go through it. We've talked about it. Now that needs to go in your pre-listing package. And now another thing that we're seeing happen more and more in our area is a radon test. Radon, we really were not seeing any tests going on radon at all until about, I guess, 5 or 6 years ago. And now it's become really prominent. We had no idea we had so much radon in our area. So the radon is a serious test now, and it costs, in addition to a general home inspection, radon tests are more expensive, it adds a little expense to the inspections. Radon, you're going to find it more in basement homes possibly than other homes. So if it's got a basement and you're working with a buyer, you want to make sure that they know to do the radon test. All right. A radon test, it has to, when the test comes back, it has to be under 4 pica. Okay. And if it's beyond 4, then some remediation has to be done in order for it to be safe for all occupants of the house. Sometimes there may be what's called they've got a machine already in there that is remediating constantly. It may be in the basement of a property. There are other ways to remediate if it's not a serious radon issue. It may be just a pipe that they put up through the house and go through through the roof. So, but just make again, particularly for basement home, but give them this little brochure, your sellers the brochure, so that they know that the buyers are going to be given this brochure, so that they may have and again, they may need to disclose to you that they know that there's been some radon issue. And that is one of the things on that residential property disclosure. Okay. So this is just a nice little brochure that has been created. Now, that one is the one I just showed you, is one we use in North Carolina. I kind of like the little one in South Carolina, so I gave you one for South Carolina too. It doesn't matter that state specific on radon tests. Okay. So whichever one you like, or you might want to use one or the other. But I thought it was a good little brochure. Now, there are 3 or 4 what we call worksheets in that we use in our office. These are not state specific. These are ones that we work with in the office. The security system disclosure. When a seller has a security system, most likely in this day and time, they're going to be built into the house. The system itself is a fixture because it's already built in. What's not covered anywhere in our documentation is the service contract. Because see, the seller has a service contract, let's say with CPI or ADT, whatever those letters are. If they have a service contract, they're probably paying a monthly bill. That contract has to be settled before you close on the house, because a buyer is not going to automatically assume that that service contract. The service contract is between the seller and ADT, APTD, whatever it is.
I got you.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. They have to settle that contract. Now, there are transfer fees if the buyer does choose to continue the contract. Sometimes there is a transfer fee. I've recently found one that there wasn't a transfer fee, which I thought was wonderful. But the important thing is for your seller to find out. You don't have to do anything with this except to make them aware that they need to call their service provider and find out what it's going to cost if they move it to a new house, or if the buyer were to assume it, what would it cost? Or if they're moving out of state and not going to be using them, what's it going to cost them to get out of the contract? And generally there is a fee to get out of a contract, right? So that's what this little form is about. It is not a form that you're going to require. If you're the listing agent, it's for you to make the seller aware. And if right now, if you have the seller sign it, that's all you have to do. You do not have to give this to the buyer or get the buyer's agent to fill it out, because this is a form for you working with your client. All right. You can't require an agent from another firm to have this filled out, because it's an in-house worksheet type form. All right. On the other hand, if you are the buyer's agent, which you are right now, you want to be aware of this form, because you don't want your buyer to come up on the day of closing and find out, oh, they owe this much money on a transfer fee, or they need to decide not to get it, or to get it. So again, you use the form for your client, for the information for your client, whether it's the buyer or the seller, and then get their initials or their signature. Again, just between you and your client, and to turn into the office. All right. The utilities, this is another one. You want your seller to fill this out. You want the seller to make this available to buyers. It really is very helpful for buyers to know where utilities are being paid. They don't, they can Google a lot of stuff, but some of them are quirky, so it really helps. Like, how many people do you have? Was being new, you might not have had this, but a lot of people move to this area and have no idea they're going to have to pay for trash service.
Oh, yeah.
They assume it's part of the county taxes. Well,
Right.
it's not, and so to pay another $60 or $70 a month to have your trash picked up, that's something they need to know. Another thing they need to know, basically, as like a cable company or fuel, maybe they have propane. They need to know where you get that propane, because that's a total separate category, and you're offered a purchase. So this can be very helpful to you. The other thing, as you I told you a while ago, we have an in-house form about the septic and sewer and well and water. This also can tell you who they think they pay their water bill to, So it's again just a handy little form. You don't have to use it; it's not required, but it's certainly recommended. Now, those are the primary forms that we would put in a pre-listing package, along with some marketing of things. You want to have your pretty smile out there and have your a little promo sheet. If you're, and right now being new, you want to get some information on the firm, how the firm is selling, how many houses a month or what. You'll see some graphs that Liz puts on Facebook a lot. Once a month, we put some graphs out there that are really, we think it's really good PR, because we stay pretty much number one, and you like to show that, because again, that's you selling yourself and selling your company, which helps you sell yourself, particularly until you get some experience and some big numbers yourself. Okay, now let's go back over here to the listing folder, and all this other stuff is fluff. All this other it's education, it's informative, it's stuff you got to have, but it's something that they can start working on before you actually sit down with them and show them your CMA, or you sit down with them and go over the listing agreement. Now, the listing agreement itself is the number on it is right here. It's number 101 down here at the bottom. And you see this little number where it says copyright 7/2022. You always want to check this date, because you want to use current forms, no matter which form you're using. In whichever state, you need to be able to have the current forms. And in the North Carolina forms, just about every July, by July 1, we have some changes that go on. So you're most likely going to see copyright 7/2022 on any form that's the current form for North Carolina forms. So you you don't have to worry about it so much at this time of the year. But when you start getting back in July and August, when the forms change July 1, that's where you have some challenges because people are still using the previous year. So, but you want to use the current one. Now, the listing agreement itself, and notice right here, it says the listing agreement is between the seller's names, go right here as sellers. And right here, the listing firm is Keller Williams Ballantyne. You don't have to put Keller Williams Ballantyne, Danielle Clinton. You know, it's the sellers with Keller Williams Ballantyne Realty or Keller Williams Realty. You can do that. This little paragraph right here, boy, we could camp out here for a few minutes too. When you're selling a property, sometimes it's not by one or two people. It may be, it might be a foreclosure. It might be owned by an LLC, an entity, as we call it, an LLC or a corporation, such as the foreclosure would be. It could be owned by someone who's a non-spouse, a non-owner spouse. And this is the paragraph that calls your attention to that. When the person that you're talking with tells you that they own the property and they have the right to sell it, if they're not the person's name who is on the tax roll, and you always want to check the tax records before you go out to somebody's house, then you want to know why. You know, you say, well, and sometimes it might be an estate, you know, maybe they did inherited it. Or if it's in the name of an LLC or a trust. I'm seeing a lot of trusts right now where people are transferring ownership into a living trust. In that document, whatever entity document it is, there should be a paragraph or a page where the person you're talking with is named as having the right to do business on behalf of the entity. If it's an LLC, most often the title is going to be manager, or it can be manager member, but it most often is going to be the register agent, the manager. If it's a corporation, it's going to be a president most of the time. Sometimes it might be a treasurer. You don't do that much with the corporations, quite honestly, in the residential side. If it's an estate, often it would be the executor or executrix that may have the right to sell everything. It may not name the executrix as the one to sell property. It may go right on to the heirs. So that's when you get those 8 people I was talking about a while ago. You're going to have heirs, several heirs and their spouses that are going to have to sign. The executrix is responsible for the administration of it, but they don't have the right, according to the will, to actually sell the property unless it's given to them in the will, which happens sometimes. So estates can be really tricky. Mercy me. I think we've had more estate sales in the last 2 years than we've had foreclosures in the last 10 years. So if you get into a situation where you're representing a seller that is an estate, give me a call or the closing attorney, and we can give you a little bit more direct instruction. But primarily, you want to know if they are named in a document whereby they would have the authority to sign on behalf of that entity, if it is an entity seller. All right. If it is an entity seller, like over here, if it's, let's say, John and Mary Smith Trust by John Smith, trustee, and Mary Smith, trustee. If it's in the estate, again, if it's an executrix, you're going to put the estate of whatever the person's name is by Mary Smith, executrix. If it's not an estate, then you're going to have several names listed here. So just be aware that sometimes it's not just 1 or 2 names that's going to go in here. You might have to have a different seller. And when you come on down here, this, anytime you see something in bold or capitalized or italicized, take note, okay?
Mhm.
This is basically saying that you did go over that working with real estate agents disclosure with them. So, and they have they represent that they have the right to sign this document. Now, right in here, uh, the effective date is or shall be the date the agreement has been signed by both the seller and the firm. Now, any agreement has to have a beginning and an end. Okay, if the term doesn't have a beginning date and an end date, it's not a valid agreement. So this divides it into two categories here. Primarily, this is the one we're going to sign as the beginning date, and this is the one we're going to put a date in as the end date. I wouldn't recommend that you take a listing for any less than about 6 months. Yes, listings have been selling pretty quickly the last few months, but it's changing so dramatically right now. If you're going to spend the money that you're going to have to spend to do a listing, you might want to go for 6 months, okay, or at least 4. If the seller just won't go for 6, go for 4. Now, this little section right here, I would just like for you in your mind, just put a big X right there. I do not recommend this option, but every now and then you do have the situation where a seller is in a listing agreement with someone else, another firm, and their listing is going to expire on a such and such a date. And if that's the case, and the seller does want to sign with you prior to that date, they being the writers for these forms have given this option. But I'm quick to tell you, you better pay attention to this right here. Article 16 of the Realtors Code of Ethics. You cannot believe the ramifications of getting into signing agreement and you starting to advertise it when it really hasn't been taken out of the MLS. It has not been terminated with the other firm. Maybe the seller had the wrong date. So if I were you, I would just not even consider that. If they want to list the property once it is expired, tell them you'll meet them at their house at 9 o'clock in the morning if they want to, and we'll get it listed. But you'd rather not do it until you know that it's truly expired. Now, the property address, remember I mentioned to you, you wanted to pull up the tax information. You always want to have the tax information as verification, although it's not 100% accurate. Sometimes that's the most accurate you're going to have available to you. So you want to pull the tax record for the property before you start filling out any paperwork or before you go to visit them, really. Notice this right here. Sometimes, and particularly because of mail delivery, an address might be different on what the seller tells you is the address and what's on the tax records. But then you have to go back and discover why is it different? And most of the time it's mail delivery. One example of that is we have a lot of houses that are listed down in Weddington. Well, the mail delivery address would be Matthews, North Carolina 28104. But they said, but I live in Weddington. Why are you putting Matthews on there? Because Matthews is the mailing address. But you want to go ahead and put the address on the listing agreement that's in the tax records. And then in MLS, you want to go ahead and put the mailing address and make a note down in agent remarks that there is a variation of the address between tax records and MLS due to mail delivery. You see, that way, when people start trying to look up the tax records, they need to know that they need to find the right address, right?
Right.
So just be aware of that. Their legal descriptions, it's very rare, if ever, the tax records would not be accurate on the legal address, the legal description. Now, in our area, we do not use plat references. We don't go by plat reference. We go more by the lot, block, and section. And we do record in the deed book at a certain page. So you're not going to fill in this information most of the time. You will have a subdivision condominium if it is a subdivision, or if there's a condominium and it's going to be in your tax records. You will not put anything right here in the plat book and page, because again, we don't use those. You will see on the tax records a deed book and page. That typically is a long string of numbers with a hyphen somewhere in the middle. You'll have 5 or 6 numbers, and then a hyphen or dash and some other numbers. The first set of numbers is your deed book, and your second set of numbers is the page. And it may say deed reference rather than deed book and page. It'll say deed reference sometimes. In fact, I think in MLS that's what it has. So you're not going to have a plat reference, but you're going to have a deed. Now, right here where it says other description, this is where I want you to write the legal description that it says on the tax record that is the legal description. Often it'll start with an L, like an L14, then B12-M something. That is your lot and block and the section. And sometimes it'll have the street address even on it. So whatever it has in the tax records, just put the full amount right in here, because there's enough lines to write it. Now, you'll remember from pre-licensing something called meets and bounds. That's a legal description that's long. Yeah. If you were to have to, if you do list a property, and that might be a vacant land, that would have meets and bounds, in here you would write meets and bounds, see attached, and then you put that long description on a separate piece of paper that would be attached with this. This PIN, PID, that's your property ID or parcel ID. And that's, again, a string of numbers. Most of the time it's 3 sets of numbers, but you'll see that on the tax records and it will give you that. So you won't have any trouble finding it. Now, again, this is a note. Anytime you see a note or a warning that's in red, take note and take warning. All right. Now this next section, I got to tell you, fixtures, mercy me. Look at all the things they list as fixtures. Yeah. There's a bunch of things, and sellers need to see this list. Sellers don't necessarily think, is this supposed to stay with the house or not stay with the house? Right. And so they need to see what, according to this contract, they must leave with the house. So you go over this pretty thoroughly with them. We've already talked about the security system. See this right here? That's the very first one, alarm and security system right here. Yeah. If you haven't gotten any information on that security system worksheet that I gave you a while ago, this is the time to pull it out and let's talk about this. You got to talk to them about it. Alarm systems, in the security systems, there are things called accessories. The system itself may be built into the house, but they have something called accessories. And when those accessories can be removed without causing any damage, or it may be just a computer voice even. I'll have to tell you, this is the sweetest story. This little older man called me one day and he said, "Ma'am, I've just got to tell you, there's something wrong with the security system. I just bought my new house, and your agent was the listing agent, and there's something not right working. My door's not talking to me now." I thought that was so sweet. My door's not talking to me. That's true. See, but that's an accessory, and apparently that was shut off, obviously because somebody didn't help him to understand that he could have that, but he'd have to pay extra for it. So, so when your door's not talking to you, you don't have an accessory. So talk to them about accessories. You also want to talk to them about like Ring doorbells, you know, those are actually built in now, but if they're going to be taken, then they can be taken as long as you make a note right here that it will be taken right here. Other items that do not convey. It can be a fixture that doesn't convey, but you got to list it right here. All right. Things that are leased and not owned, that's those accessories we were talking about, right where you would put it in here. With the security system, if there's an accessory that's not going to stay with this system itself that's built in, you got to note it right here. But this always helps me to describe a little bit of what a fixture is. If it causes damage when you take it away or move it from the wall, that's a fixture, and the seller is responsible to make sure that they fix the wall back. Let's say they chose right here to put that they don't want to leave the mount on the TV, you know, because those TV mounts are real big right now.
Yep.
The TV is personal property, but the mount is not. The mount is mounted to the wall in such a way that if you remove that, it's going to cause damage. So therefore it's called a fixture. If they say they're not leaving the mount, let's say over the fireplace, which is a common place right now, they have to know that they have to repair that wall in substantially the same condition as before they ever installed that mount. So in other words, they have to get somebody to go in and fix that drywall and paint it and fix it nice. They can't just leave a hole and take them out, even though they put it in here that they're not going to convey the mount. Mounts are pretty reasonably priced now. I don't see this as an issue, really. Most of the time, you know, the sellers just say, well, I'll just take my TV and leave the mount because I'm not going to go through fixing it. It'll cost you more to get it fixed than it would to leave the mount, unless you got several. So be aware that if it is leased and not owned, you note it here. If they're not going to leave it, you note it here. And let me go back to the fixtures one more time, then I'll go on to personal property. Look right here, storage shed and utility building. This is something recently added to this list. So when you're walking through the property or around the property and you see a storage building, they don't know to say to you, I'm leaving it or I'm taking it. They've got an assumption in their mind already. But you have to, again, be the leader and preempt that question or the answer to that question. Say, what were your plans with the shed? Were you planning to leave it? See, you're educating, but you're getting information. And you said, well, now in the listing agreement, that is considered a fixture. All storage sheds and utility buildings are required to stay unless we put it right down here. It does not convey. So if they say, well, no, I'm not leaving my storage shed. My she shed is going to go with me. So right here is where you're going to put the storage shed will not convey. Then when you enter the listing in MLS, there is a category for exceptions, or I think it's called exceptions, yeah, where you would put storage shed. In other words, that's not going to remain. That doesn't mean the buyer won't ask for it, but it tells you that the seller is not obligated to sell it. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
The storage shed, another thing, mirrors right here. Mirrors attached to walls, ceilings, cabinets, or doors. And now look here, all bathroom wall mirrors. Oh, you can't imagine the arguments I have heard through these 40 years. Really? You know, in the powder rooms, they put beautiful decorator mirrors and they hang them on nails. They are not attached to the walls most of the time, right?
Yeah.
They might be on a bolt, but generally it's on a nail, like a picture, picture frame. And when the seller takes that mirror, the buyer's wife typically is irate because she loved that mirror and she wanted that mirror. Recently I heard one say, well, that was given to me as a wedding gift, and my husband's deceased now, and I really wanted that. And the tears and the explanation. It's like, why didn't you say something? Guess what? The listing agent didn't preempt walking through the powder room. That's the first thing you should think when you walk through a powder room. Now, are you planning on leaving this mirror, or do you plan on taking it? Because if you plan to take it, the contract says all bathroom mirrors. The form writers decided they would just cut to the chase and say, you can't take that mirror because it's part of the house. Anyway, I just want to point those particular ones out to you. All right. One of the things you need to be aware of is this little statement right here. Pairing or unpairing and deleting data from devices. You know, if there is going to be, let's say it's one of those garage door opener things. I mean, you leave garage door openers, okay, but maybe it's an app on the phone that needs to be eliminated. That's got to be, everything's going to have to be unpaired, and that's not an easy thing to help sellers to understand. But it may have to be reset to the manufacturing settings. It's like clearing off the computer.
Right.
And that is a requirement. It's the seller's obligation that there should not be any access back to that house or within that house after closing, unless there's a lease afterwards. Now let's see. Now let's talk about personal property. Anything that's not on that list is considered personal property. I can't warn you enough. Do not write anything, all appliances, all this, all that. It's too nondescript. Okay. Got an issue going on right now. An agent, thank good Lord, he's not in my office, but my listing agent is. He writes all appliances. What does that mean? What does all appliances mean? Appliance is a broad word, and there's a lot of things it could mean. It would have been one more word for him to write, but he was too lazy to write refrigerator, washer, and dryer. So he writes all appliances. So now they're in a fight over the washer and dryer. The washer and dryer are not considered appliances in the residential properties listing agreement. Typically, those are things that are in the kitchen. They're not in the laundry room. You know, the appliances are considered in the kitchen.
Right.
And you know, in fact, you can see right here, any personal property that will be part of the sale should be identified in this paragraph, not all appliances. Stop being so lazy. Up about them. I am so over lazy agents. So, and even on the other up here before you get to fixtures, look here. Any fixture or other item described in subparagraphs A and B that will not be a part of the sale should be identified. It's got to be identified. We've got to be more specific about things. So now we're in and this is actually the second one in probably in a month's time that we've had an issue on all appliances or writing. I'll tell you another one. In MLS, if you offer the refrigerator and or washer dryer, let's just talk about the refrigerator. If you offer the refrigerator and you get an offer to purchase from a buyer's agent that does not have the word refrigerator right here, the buyer does not get the refrigerator, even though you had offered it in MLS.
Oh my goodness. Oh, because
see, that can be that's offering. The seller is offering offer the refrigerator. If because it's a personal property, it does not have to be left if it's not written in the contract. And that will happen a lot of times. And so it's must be identified, which again is coming from this statement right here, the warning. So, because see, a seller has a right to sell the refrigerator if he doesn't think the buyer wants it. Buyer may not want it. But if I was you as a prudent listing agent and I saw contract come in and it doesn't say the refrigerator, I think I'd probably ask. It's better to ask and find out, did you mean to put the refrigerator in there or not, than it is to wait till the day that they do the final walkthrough and the refrigerator's gone and they say to you, but you had it in the MLS. Yes, I had it in the MLS, but you didn't say you wanted it, so the seller sold it to the next door neighbor.
Oh gosh.
You see this situation? Yeah, so just be aware of that. Okay.
Bad.
All kinds of fun things you get to learn with class. A home warranty, right? Whoops. We're not seeing a lot of home warranties right now because the market's been so crazy, but we're getting ready to go back into need and wanting home warranties. There's very few buyers that don't want a home warranty. So we have several different warranties that you can get the digital copy, just like I did on those brochures I showed you on the lead-based paint. You have your digital copies during home warranty. You might want to even put one of those if you want to in your pre-listing package, but definitely you want to give it to your buyer so that they can have a choice of a type of warranty. If the seller offers a warranty, they don't pay for it until closing, but it's a good marketing tool that the seller is offering the warranty. The seller will pay for it at closing, but if they have, let's say the water heater goes out before closing, they're going to have the same advantage of the insurance warranty as the buyer will. They'll pay the same $75 for the service person to come out, but the insurance company will replace the water heater for them. So it's a real good selling technique, a marketing for the property, but it's a good advantage for the sellers just in case, because you never know when something's going to go out. So it's to me, I think it's a no-brainer if you're going to think you're going to have to pay for one anyway, because all buyers want it.
Right.
Now, this right in here on the listing price, this is where you're going to have your CMA. You can do a brief CMA, you can do a very full detail. I would suggest you might want to get familiar with something that's called RPR. That is a program that comes from realtor.com. There's some wonderful, they have reports that are like 28 pages long or 68 pages long. You can choose what you want to go in there. It's really very nice for you to be very knowledgeable of the community and also share it with your prospective seller. I use it and find it very, very helpful. So and they have wonderful, YouTube videos that you can watch and learn how to do the CMAs on there. There's the CMA classes that are offered down at Canopy. That's a really decent CMA, quite honestly. For years we recommended just doing it manually, and I still really like to do it manually because I feel like then I get to know more about the community, and I know more about it than if I'm plugging in numbers from the computer program. But it sure looks nicer when you do the computer program.
Oh.
So you will discuss with the seller. The seller will agree to a price. Now talk about the loan, the different types of loans. In MLS, you are allowed to put a number of different loan types, or how it can be sold. When you write your offer to purchase, you'll only have one though. But when you're offering it, you're saying the seller obviously will take cash. The FHA VA, you're going to have some limits on the amount of money that can be borrowed on those two. The USDA, that's 100% financing, but it is location sensitive. Not all neighborhoods would qualify for USDA. So you would want to make sure to check. And again, that's an online program, or you can check with a lender to get them to check and see if USDA 100% financing would be available in a certain area. Conventional is what you're going to see most, I guess, when you look at it. The conventional, it has pretty high limits on what they can buy, and then they can go jumbo. So the conventional is what you're going to see in most loans or many loans. Loan assumptions, we have not seen loan assumptions in probably 15 years, but I have a feeling in the next few years, because of these low interest rates that people purchased with the last couple of years, we probably are going to start seeing some loan assumptions. I'm not seeing them yet. Seller financing, you don't see very much seller financing. So if you do, then there's we can talk person to person on that. Right now, you probably not going to be offering that. Right here, you go to the firm's compensation. Again, for years it was 6%. And watch this little word right here, total. Let's say we're asking the seller to agree to 6% here and the total. Now go to the next page. Out of that 6%, we're going to pay a buyer's agent, someone representing the buyer. We're going to offer a compensation of 3%. We do not compensate by dollars. It's always a percent. Now, we do not cooperate with sub-agents. We don't let somebody else come in and represent our seller. We represent the seller. We do not come in with somebody else's compensation package. So do not check this, do not check this. We only work with buyer agents on this, and that's who we cooperate with. Now, what I'm seeing, more than 3%, I'm seeing 2.5% put right here. And when you go back up here to the total, it's whether or not, if your seller will agree to 6, then you as a listing agent could keep 3.5%, which will cover some expenses like photography, measurements, staging. Sometimes you work it out that way. Other times the seller says, well, I'm not gonna go 6%. So maybe they'll go 5%. In that case, you may do 2.5 and 2.5. So we are in a very unusual time in our history for, I guess it's the mid-90s, since buyer's agencies came into being. We've seen an equal split. We've rarely ever seen an unequal sharing of commission. We are now seeing listing firms or excuse me, the listing agents who are not sharing equally. A lot of times it's a team that would not share equally, and it makes buyers agents very, very unhappy. But it's coming out of some lawsuits from the Department of Justice against National Association of Realtors, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. But just be aware that you might look in MLS and the cooperating broker is not going to get one. The other day somebody said they saw $1, and I'm thinking, why did you even bother, but they're saying we're not going to pay a buyer's agent. The buyer's agent the buyer's agent can be paid by the buyer. Well, that's one of the lawsuits that's going on right now. So we're kind of in a real ambiguous time, but I would do my best to get at least 2.5 to go to the buyer's agent, and hope to get that you can get at least a 2.5 or maybe 3, maybe you go 5.5% on total. And I've spent more time on this than I want to, but at the same token, this is what you're going to be facing out there, of people wanting to cut that commission. And you kind of have to make a business decision yourself too. Remember, when you go to work for a company, if you want to know what your compensation is going to be, right? Well, that's what this is. This agreement is your employment agreement with that seller. And if they don't value your services, then you have a right not to have to work for what value they want to put on the service. So not many of us walk away from listings, but every now and then you just have to suck it up and say, you know what? I can't work for that. By the time Uncle Sam takes half of my salary and my company has their portion of it, I can't feed my family on that. And so, that you might not say it, but you have to have a mindset, and there are different circumstances you'll get into. And if you get one terribly bad, give me a call. We'll talk about it. Okay. All right. Most of these other things you'll probably need to read through this, but I'm going to touch on some more blanks here. One of the things I really wanted to call your attention to is this little section right here. This page is seriously important. First of all, wait a minute. This is basically talking about the fair housing. And North Carolina is one of the states that has been very supportive of the efforts on fair housing. We have had this law for many, many years, but we have not had the emphasis on this law as much until the last maybe a couple of years. They have taken it to the degree that right here, you see how it's bold and capitalized? Look right down here. They're asking the seller to initial that you indeed did talk to them about this and about this. Now, this right here has to do with what we affectionately call love letters. These are the letters that sometimes buyers like to write in order to help the seller like them best. Okay, it's a way of relating to that seller. So, and they work. I got to tell you, a lot of times the sellers, if there's a multiple offer situation, the seller is going to want to know something about the buyer, and often it will be a personal reason beyond the actual bottom line dollar to them. And so these love letters were letters that they would write and say, well, oh, I could just see my children playing in that backyard. They're just going to love those trees. And, you know, sometimes people can just really write flowery letters. See, you can't write a letter like that because you can't use the word children. Children is a violation of the fair housing. Can you believe that? You have to be real careful. Even when you put a listing in MLS, you can't use children, okay? Can't say kids either, you know? In fact, right now they're getting away from the word even using family. So you have to have the seller to understand that if a buyer were to write such a letter, you can't convey it to them, all right? That's not part of the offer. It is a separate means of communication. So we as realtors are not going to be party to the potential fair housing violation that could be in that letter, nor are we going to take the responsibility of reading that letter and trying to decide for ourselves if it's fair housing. Okay, so we basically, as North Carolina agents, are saying we're not going to convey a love letter because we do not want to get you or us in a fair housing violation. And again, you're going to get your initials right here. Now, this next section, this is the section right now that causes the most confusion. When you get a listing, you do not have to put it in MLS the day you get the listing, all right? There is something called Clear Cooperation Policy that came into being in May of 2020. Yes, about the time COVID was in full swing. That policy says that a listing must be entered in MLS within 1 business day. Well, I got to tell you, it's next to impossible to put a listing in within 1 business day. Even if you took the listing on Friday and put it in on Monday, you still got to get your pictures. You got to get your measurements. There's so many things to do, and you don't want to do all these things till you get a listing, you know? So then they came up with this concept of the coming soon period of time. The people who wrote the policy thought that agents would use something called coming soon and use that period of time to get their pictures done, to get their photographs of their measurements. So their concept was to use that time to let the marketplace, as far as realtors, nobody else, but the realtors, to know that property is coming on the market. It's not ready to be shown yet, because in that stage, that coming soon no show, you can't show the property. That's the big, 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 big thing you don't do. If you're in coming soon, you can do all this stuff getting ready, and you can tell people about it. You can even put it on your social media, as long as you say it's coming soon and nobody sees that property. Okay. So that that policy came into being a couple of years ago. It has caused a different stir in the market. Interestingly enough, coming soon, the way most agents in our area uses coming soon, is to tease the market. You know, it's like, it's going to be here, it's going to be here, and it's going to be here. So keep an eye out for it. Look at it. And you know what? We have had multiple offers in coming soon, and nobody's seeing the property. We've actually had multiple offers of people not even seeing the property because they were so desperate. The inventory was so low. Can you imagine making an offer and putting $20,000 down and do DDF? It's like, no. We did. We've had multiples of those. So, but that's not the market we're in right now. That has changed. Okay. So
that's crazy.
It is crazy. Let's go back and look at what's happening right now with our form, the way we are embracing the clear cooperation policy. Right here where it says the commencement of marketing. If your seller is, maybe they haven't painted the mailbox yet, or they hadn't put flowers out. If they want to wait a few days, let's say you sign the agreement on, let's say October the 28th, all right? But nobody's ready to do anything until November the 4th. So you sign the agreement, which was the commencement of the listing on the 28th. By the 4th, you're going to start some type of marketing. So right here, this would be the marketing date. This would be November the 4th, all right? Because it's going to be a silent ghost listing during those days, because you are just doing those last minute things before you start introducing it. Now, when you come down here, you have two options. This is 10A, then 10B. You have two options under 10B. One is what's called public marketing, and one is called office exclusive. Those are your two options: public marketing or office exclusive. Let's go back up here. Under public marketing, and again, you want to get initials that you've got their agreement on this. One of the ways you're going to do public marketing might be coming soon or not. If you're going to do coming soon as one of your public marketing, you need another form. That form is a form that MLS produces, and let me show you what it looks like. Okay, where'd it go?
Oh, you passed.
There it is, coming soon. Okay, you've seen this. Oh, this is a coming soon form. The coming soon form explains that you can put it in the MLS, you can advertise it on social media, as long as you put the word coming soon. You can put a sign in the yard, as long as you put a rider that says coming soon. That's to alert anybody that it's coming, but the issue is right here, may not be shown. See right here in red? You can put it in that status, but it may not be shown. And if there's violation, it's $1,000. Our second will be $3,000. I've had two different agents that had to pay the $1,000 because they let somebody in the house. Well, this first happened. I mean, it hasn't been recently, but we had two agents who did. You know, so, and again, kind of innocently. In one situation, it was the painter that let a neighbor come in, and they were off, and it, you know, cost the agent $1,000. But anyway, so the agents are to make sure that staging people and painters and sellers cannot show it to anybody during that period. All right. So when you have the coming soon, you're going to put it in MLS, and whatever date that you want to put in the MLS. Then you're going to have the date that you want to go active. The active date is going to be, it all depends on what the seller wants, when you want to go active. And so when you're going to have an active date here. Let's say it's going to be, we said the 4th is when we're going to put it in coming soon, right? So let's say the 14th, give you 10 days. All right, and coming soon. So right here, this date, let's say the 14th, is going to be also up there in number 10. I'll show you that in just a minute, but I need to show you first the signature boxes here. When you decide to go coming soon, your property address, this is going to be the seller's signature. This is going to be your signature. Guess who this is?
Member participant.
This is me. This is the BIC, the broker in charge.
Oh.
So you're the listing agent. But the member participant, that's the name that they give to a broker in charge at MLS. It's called member participant. So when you see that name, then I have to sign it. All right. So when you are sending all these papers out on DocuSign, you can order the signature times. So you order yours first, typically, then you're going to have the seller sign it. Then you do me last. All right. So just have it a part of all your other documents you're sending to the seller, and then the order the way that I would sign it on this form. Now let's go back up here to the 10, and I'm going to show you. I told you about that marketing date. Remember, keep that in mind. Where'd it go? 10. There it is. Okay. See this date right here? That should be that November 10th date. The same date that's marketing date on the form must match this date right here.
Okay, to be changed to
sense?
active on. Okay.
Uh-huh. So when you put the listing in the MLS as coming soon, it must go in on the date that November the 4th up there at the top. All right, back up here where we had November the 4th here. It must go in there. Then here is when you're going to put the 10th, and that date is what's on the coming soon form, and it will automatically go active that date. When you put it in MLS, it'll ask you for the marketing date. That means it goes active. It's going to be syndicated to everybody, and everybody's going to know that they can now make appointments to come and show their house.
Gotcha.
All right, does that make sense? Now,
Yeah.
all right, so and most of us, when we check all these other boxes of public marketing, that can be coming soon, or it doesn't have to be. If you choose not to do the coming soon, just don't check that, and you don't use the addendum. Okay, you're just going to put all these other things. Now, the other option has to do with office exclusive. Office exclusive means that just the agents in our firm can know about the property. You cannot put a sign in the yard. You cannot advertise it to anybody. You can't even talk to an agent from another firm about it.
Oh, office.
It means exclusively you work with somebody in our firm. Now, you can send the information out to your sphere, and anybody in our office can send information out to their sphere. You just cannot work with a co-broking agent, because if you do, it immediately has to go into MLS.
Oh,
Because it's not going to be in MLS. This is just an agreement, and that agreement, I'll show you. You're going to have a form that looks a lot like that coming soon form. It's the same design. Okay, it's down here, I promise you. There's your coming soon. Now the next one it's called firm exclusive, not office exclusive. MLS calls it firm exclusive. Now this basically outlines who can see the property, when they can see the property, what you can do. So as you get familiar with this form, you'll be more comfortable with the firm exclusive. Here's basic information from the seller. And as you can see, you're going to explain each one of these paragraphs and get the seller's initials. They want to make sure that you explain it to them. And each one of the paragraphs has a seller's initials. This right here is very important. If the seller wants their sale to be only within the firm and not public knowledge, and not ever put in MLS before or after it closes, they can check does not authorize. If they will authorize you to put it in MLS after it closes, for comp's sake, really, it's, for the comparables for us as we're trying to price other properties, then they can check. It's okay after I close that you put it in here. Then you're like that. I have to have this information, and let me show you right here. Here's this pattern again. Right here's your pattern. That looks familiar, right? Signature of the seller. And this time you have to print your name and you sign, and looky here, the member participant signature here. Within 2 business days of you taking the listing, remember back on October 28th, of 2 days of you taking the listing, I have to have my signature on this, and I have to submit this information to the MLS. It's not put in a listing. It's not putting for anybody to see unless there's a complaint about the property. Is it listed or is it not listed? Then they can say, yes, the broker in charge has confirmed that there is a firm exclusive, and therefore they're operating within the way they're supposed to. So if you get a firm exclusive, God bless you, make sure that within 2 business days, you get all these signatures and get mine. And let me be the last one, because I'm the one who has to sign it and put the information into MLS, not as a listing, just to register it, basically. So now back up here where it says office exclusive. Obviously you're going to wait a minute, I went too far that time. You're going to get the seller's initial here if that's the way they want to go. We don't have an awful lot of people who want to go firm exclusive. That was really designed for confidentiality. Sometimes sports people may not want their house advertised. We've sold some lovely homes of national musicians that are known nationally, and so sometimes it's for that. But the reason I see it more often than not is for someone who's just not ready to go on the market for, say, a month or 2, but they want you to go ahead and get the listing, but they're not going to be ready for 2 months because they're remodeling or something. And I see agents using it for that purpose. Every now and then a neighbor wants to buy the house, and the seller says, I don't want to put it in MLS if we're going to go ahead and sell to the neighbor, so there's different reasons, but most often you're going to go the public marketing, and under the public market you decide to go coming soon or not. You're probably not going to use this as much. This kind of explains a little bit what I just told you here. On the lock boxes, you do have to have the permission of the seller to put a lock box, and please use the super box. I tell you, combination lock boxes are so unsafe. And I know they're expensive. They're like $110, but they're expensive. But buy one at a time or borrow one. Sometimes we have to borrow those because they are expensive. But you do use those super boxes, because when someone accesses the house, in order to get the key, they have to put their information in that iBox, and therefore you can go back and see if somebody's been in the house that didn't make an appointment. That does happen sometimes, not often, but it does. So just be cautious of that. Well, I have now talked 10 minutes over my period of time. And like I said, I could probably go another 3 hours. But I've usurped enough of your spare time this afternoon.
Oh,
But I'm going to send all these to you. And as you go through them, don't hesitate at all to give me email. It's my full name at kw.com, or give me a call. Okay. And
okay.
I enjoyed seeing you again. I love your pretty smile.
Thank
And
you.
good to visit with you. And like I said, there's some other goodies in here, but we've covered the most critical part. Okay. I'll also give you some extra forms to look at as you're going through this. The those two forms, the professional services disclosure is not as critical for sellers, but you definitely want it with every buyer, because you want to know, you want to have proof that they tell you they're going to do certain inspections, and you want to know who orders it. So you would definitely want to do that, but we'll talk about that next week. Next week, we'll be talking about buyers. So I hope
Okay.
I'll see you next week.
Okay, great.
Okay.
One question, so just so I'll understand, my point of contact for if I got transaction questions, is the T Group person, correct? Because I'm working through my, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You work with them, and like I say, if you can't get them, call me. If you can't get me, call Tasha. So between your T Group leader and me and Tasha, hopefully we will be able to answer any questions at the time you need them. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. You have a good day, honey. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.